Hope I have.
Hello.
Hello.
I think
So,
people are joining in, so let's just get to know each other a little better. But before that, Sandhya, uh,
yeah,
I would just like to, acknowledge you for being here. So many of you can see that Sandhya is not on video, and it's unlikely for her to be not on video, right? She's unwell, but being the director of credentials and a woman of her word, she said, like, Divishi, we are going to do this webinar because it is crucial, it is important, and all of you are waiting for it, right? So let's start this webinar by congratulating two new members who have completed all their criterias and have just become PCC. So Payal Malhotra and Sonali Naidu. So join your hands and you can congratulate them. I'm not sure whether they are in the room, but we
not
are
yet.
proud to have them in the chapter.
Not yet.
Not yet, right? Yeah.
Hello, Anuj.
Hmm. Uh, so right after that, right, why don't you put in the chat box? We have approximately like 25, 22 people in the room. Where are you logging from and what is the expectation from the webinar? Just very quickly. Why don't you type it in the chat box? And we were chatting with few of you. So sweet of Stephanie sending you healings and get well wishes. Good evening, Sangeeta. Why don't you write down where you're logging in from and what are you looking forward to from this webinar? Hi, Helen from Angkor Wat, Cambodia. Beautiful place. Mm-hmm. Let clarity on PCC. Examination process. That's exactly what we're going to do. Understand the testing process. Beautiful, Melissa. Sonai from Mumbai. Nice. Vivek from Noida, welcome back. You're from our chapter itself, right? Learn more about the ICF credentialing process and expectations, right? So credentialing process has many parts today. What we're going to focus on is regarding the examination. Okay.
Hi, Johan and Marjan. Hello.
Right. So now you
Yeah.
want to decide on online or in-person testing? Okay, we're going to talk about that. Understanding testing process. Need help with credentialing tips for picking best and worst options. Got it, Sandhya. Anuj from Bangalore looking for sample type of questions asked in the ICF examination. Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. So, a lot of questions out there, and we are going to cover most of it, what we could see. And we will be doing it in two parts. One, uh, okay, or maybe, let us move ahead and we will demystify how we are going to do this seminar for you. But have your questions ready because this webinar is exclusively for answering all of them, putting in the chat box. Sandhya, do you want to add anything before we move ahead?
Not really. Thank you for taking over. Thanks so much. I'm quite a voiceless wonder, as you can see today. And
No worries. We are
yeah,
going to,
thanks, Tipshi.
make share all the information that you have asked for today, and we are smart enough to do. We will do it in our own way. Okay, so let's get started. So in the last webinar, this is what we kind of covered. We covered about your credentialing pathway, okay, and the different ways to do it. Your level 2, level 1 portfolio path, and how to renew it, right? So before we get into the topic for today, Is there any question? I can see one or two had some questions regarding credentialing. If you have any questions regarding that, this is the time to ask. Any questions so far? Sneha is brother of Vivek from Noida. Wish to learn more about the examination. Yes, we are going to cover. Sneha, anything that you would want to know from the past webinar? Very quickly, 30 seconds, and we can answer your questions, or we will move to the examination part. So I'm not seeing any questions, Sandhya, so all of them are geared up towards the webinar today. So,
I'm sorry, I thought of a question.
yes,
Is
please.
there a way to, sorry, this is Steph. Is there a way to get a recording from the last call? Because I wasn't able to be on it.
Yes, it is there on YouTube. I'll share a link.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Lots of webinars there. All the webinars are there, Steph.
Yeah,
Thank you. Good to know.
yeah. So I'll share the link and you can go and watch the entire webinar. Great. So before we get into talking about the examinations, so I'll just share a little about my experience. So while working on this webinar series with Sandhya, I moved from ACC to PCC, which means in 2022 I have given the earlier version of the CK examination, and I have appeared and cleared the new version of it. While doing both, you know, been there's the process is obviously there, but something which is not talked about is what I'd like to share up front is this examination, when you're sitting for it, it requires you to actually sign a non-disclosure agreement. So this is to ensure that the standards of ICF remains that aligned with the standards of the National Commission for Credentialing Agencies, okay, and ISO. While doing so, we have, before we start the examination, we have to agree to this statement. And I'm reading it out for you. I agree that I will not at any time discuss the content of the exam with anyone, and I will not at any time record, copy, disclose any exam question or answer in whole or in part, in any form or by any means, orally, in writing, online, in an internet chat room, message board, forum, or otherwise. Why I'm sharing this is because today, what we're going to share, and we're going to talk about the exam, what we are going to share is going to be from ICF. So, many of you might not know that the center webinar that we're talking about is being kind of published by ICF online. And today we are going to take you through learning this, about answering all these questions about the webinar from the ICF portal itself. If you are already a member of ICF, then you will be able to access it. You will be able to see it. I can share this link with you. And, today we're going to watch it together. But if you have an access, a full membership, you can go and complete. There's an evaluation at the end, and you can earn CUs, right? But those of you who haven't, completed the process, you can watch it with us. But before you take the examination, I'm sure you will be taking up the membership, and I would invite you that time to go ahead and collect your CUs. Okay, so that's what we're going to do in the next 1 hour. Learn it from the global director of credentialing about what this examination is. So, ready, everyone? So, I'll just, can you all see the screen? And can you all hear the sound? Just drop in the chat box a yes if you can.
All right, welcome to today's webinar.
I'm just going to
Today-
stop it. Okay. Got it. And after every part, I'm going to stop for questions because Sandhya is there. We'll be happy to take, the questions, but let's listen to what Carrie has to share.
Today we are part 4 of our ICF credentialing webinar series, and the topic is demystifying the ICF credentialing exam. So we know this is a hot topic right now. We have 2 wonderful speakers with us that I'll be introducing in just a minute. And so this is part 4 of the series. Part 1 we held on February 21st. It was the value of ICF credentialing. Part 2, how ICF is advancing team coaching, was held on March 28th. Part 3, the nuts and bolts of credentialing, was held on May 16th. We have the recordings of all 3 of these. If you have not had a chance to view them, they can be found in the learning portal, the ICF learning portal. And you can also watch the recording and earn your CCEs, which will go into your transcript. Part 5 will be held on September 5th. It will be mentor coaching versus coaching supervision. And then on November 7th, we'll have giving back through the ICF Foundation and Ignite. So if you are an ICF credential holder, this is Ignite programs you are able to participate in for pro bono coaching efforts. So this session is being recorded. The recording will be able to be accessed on demand in our ICF learning portal. CCEs will be provided after the webinar. So if you're attending live, I will be emailing you your CCE certificate after the webinar today, along with the slide deck, a PDF of the slide deck. So you'll receive that this afternoon. And then for those watching the recording on the ICF learning portal, you'll be able to take a learning checkpoint and earn your CCEs after the learning checkpoint, and they will go into your transcript. So Wordly is available today for today's session in 26 languages. You can either watch a transcription in another language or click the audio and listen to the audio. And I would like to introduce our 2 speakers today. So we have Carrie Abner. She's our Vice President for Credentials and Standards at ICF. She works to ensure high standards, value, and integrity of ICF credentials for all who hold them. Previously, she served as Assistant Director for Communications at the Council of State Governments, where she worked with state legislators, Supreme Court justices, and executive branch leaders to foster collaboration and sharing of best practices across the states. Carrie holds a master's degree in international affairs from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. I would like to introduce Aileen Gordon. She's our Director of Operations for ICF Credentials and Standards. She joined ICF in May 2020 as part of the credentialing support team. In 2023, she took on the role of Director of Operations for Credentials and Standards. She lives in Georgetown, Kentucky, and in her spare time enjoys gardening and reading. So before I turn it over to Carrie and Aileen, I'd like to let you know that please include any questions or comments you have in the chat or the Q&A. And April Summerford and I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A, and whatever questions have not been addressed during the presentation, we will have a Q&A at the end, so we will be able to address those then. And now I would like to turn it over to Carrie and Aileen.
Thank you so much, Anik, and welcome everyone. It's always so exciting for me to see who all is joining and from what parts of the world. I've been with the ICF for nearly 7 years now, and that never gets old to see where everyone is joining into one of these global sessions. So that's really exciting. Welcome. I'm so glad that you've tuned in. And I'm curious, as we get started, encourage you to chat again in the chat box. Are you coming here as someone who is looking to apply for an ICF credential in the coming year? Are you here as a mentor coach to support current and future credentialing candidates? Or are you part of an accredited program, or just here out of interest? I'm curious to see who all is joining us today. Wonderful. Okay, so we've got some mentor coaches, got some candidates who are getting ready for the exam, applying for credentials. That's wonderful. Excellent. Well, I hope that this session is going to provide some really helpful information to each of you, regardless of how you're coming to this session, whether you're a candidate, a mentor coach, an educator, or just interested in the process. We've got a great presentation and we look forward to providing some helpful information. So great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. I'm going to start my slideshow. All right. So what are we going to talk about today? We've got several important things that we want to cover in this session, starting with a really important question, which is, why did ICF create a new exam for the credentialing process in the first place? How was the ICF credentialing exam developed? What's its content and format? What is the item format, and what's important to candidates about the format of the individual exam items? How the exam scoring and results were determined. We're going to provide some preliminary exam statistics to show a little bit about how this new exam is performing in the field. And then Aileen is going to share some really important strategies and tips for all of you who are preparing for the exam, thinking about applying for a credential, or supporting someone who is in the process of preparing for the exam. We'll, of course, leave some time at the end for Q&A, and of course, and just encourage you to provide those questions in the Q&A box for us to get to at the end. So, starting at the really great question, why on earth did ICF decide to create a new exam in the first place? Why was the former coach knowledge assessment replaced? And so that's where we're going to start. And right here, I have a timeline up on my screen. I'm not a graphic designer, so this is certainly not drawn to scale, but it does offer some important milestones in our history of our program and the ICF. All of you probably know that the ICF was founded and the core competencies were adopted around 1998, so they have been in place for quite some time. And in the early years of the credentialing program, which was launched just about a year later, there was no written exam to the process. Most of it was about your candidates' resumes, their work history, and some reflective components to the application process. But in 2015, ICF recognized the need to standardize the process to award credentials, really to ensure objectivity and fairness and to better align with certification leading practices. So with that, ICF launched the Coach Knowledge Assessment in 2015 that was based on the original core competencies, those competencies that were established in 1998. This exam was a multiple choice exam. It was delivered online, on demand, through unproctored test delivery. So that means that someone could log into the exam platform and take it at any point during the day or night. And so it was very convenient in that way. There was one form of the exam. And what I mean by that is that there was only one iteration of the exam. When a candidate who completed the exam, perhaps they needed to take a retake of the exam, they would receive the very same questions. There was only one pool of questions for the exam. So what that means is that over time, the delivery of this single form of the CKA through on-demand, unproctored testing, it meant that the CKA was what we call in assessment practice overexposed. there was so much exposure to those exam items, it no longer provided a fair, reliable measure of coaching knowledge. So in 2017, ICF kicked off a brand new coaching job analysis. And what a job analysis is a research initiative that identifies through research, through broad-based research, the critical knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that are really important for effective practice in any kind of job or profession, of course, in this case, in coaching. And we did this in partnership with the Human Resources Research Organization, or HUMRO. This process was completed in 2019 and resulted in the release of the updated ICF core competencies. So those competencies are truly the outcome of this research initiative called a job analysis. And while the updated core competencies were very similar to the original core competencies, there were some pretty important changes there. We went from 11 competencies into 8. So there was some consolidation of the competencies and the structure of the competencies. There was also the inclusion of a brand new competency, which of course is competency 2, embodies a coaching mindset. This was a brand new addition to the core competency framework. And along with that, a few additional sub-competencies throughout the model. So there were some additions to the model that were really important. Because of that, because of these new concepts that had been added to the core competencies, because our prior exam was what we consider overexposed, it was no longer a reliable measure of coaching knowledge and skill. We began immediately upon the release of the updated core competencies, a 2-year process to develop, pilot, test, and then launch a new written exam. And of course, that new written exam is the ICF credentialing exam. This was released last year in August of 2022, and it was developed following global standards for certification, assessment, development practice. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few slides, but it also covers the content from the updated ICF core competencies. So it's really reflective of this new competency model that was released in very late 2019. So let's talk a little bit about certification exam development in general. And what I've got here is an image that goes through the certification exam development process for any kind of certification body. So not just ICF, this is not just the ICF way, this is actually certification best practice. It's really important in developing a new exam to include certain key components, certain stages of the development process so that it's really comprehensive. The first is a job analysis. And I talked a little bit about that in that last slide with the milestones on it and the history of our program. It's a really important research study, and it provides the foundational knowledge that from which you build an exam. So there are several important stages of that research, and all of these were included in our most recent job analysis, from interviews with coaching experts, workshops and focus groups with coaches, surveys across our global community, and including those coaches who are not even affiliated with the ICF to understand coaching practice, not just the ICF way, but coaching practice in general. So all of these components were built into the job analysis process. And that allowed us to have a really solid understanding of the specific tasks, knowledges, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that are really critical to coaching practice. And what's important to note is that just like anything else, professional practices change over time, right? They're not static. They are very much dynamic. For one example, technology can drastically change the tasks associated with any kind of profession. So with that, it's really important that a certification body and a professional association like the ICF conducts their job analyses on a regular basis to make sure that they are reflecting current knowledge and best practice in that professional discipline. So we do that every 5 to 7 years, which is global best practice for certification bodies like ours. The last job analysis that we conducted was completed in 2019, and we're actually getting ready to kick off a new job analysis in the next 12 to 18 months. So we will be going into this process again. Now, after a job analysis is conducted, You then pull together subject matter experts to identify what we call test specifications. I need another glass of cup of coffee. Test specifications, or a blueprint. And that, what that does is show the critical content pieces of the exam. So what proportion of exam content should reflect the competencies that are outlined in that competency model. We'll talk a little bit more about that as it pertains to the ICF credentialing exam in just a moment. Following the development of test specifications, you then go into item writing. So assessment development experts or psychometricians, along with practitioners in that field, so in our case, coaches, will write new items for the exam. And then all of those items go through a multi-phase review process. So that can include technical reviews. It includes bias and cultural sensitivity reviews to make sure that the items don't have an unintended bias in them. Competency linkage to make sure that an item is actually assessing the knowledge or the competency that it's intended to assess. Response option ratings to make sure that the response options that are provided are accurate and appropriate. And then keying, so identifying the correct answer for each item. At the end of all of those review initiatives, then the entire exam form is reviewed to make sure that all of those items together are an accurate and effective exam. This is also conducted by subject matter experts, coaches themselves. And then finally, before the exam is launched, subject matter experts come back together again to determine the cut score or the passing score for the exam. And they provide input on what a just proficient or just qualified practitioner should know in order to pass the exam. So it's a very detailed and methodical process. At ICF, we use the modified Enghoff process, which is a particular technique, and it's aligned with certification exam development best practice. So we look at each item individually, and that in turn determines the cut score of the exam. So a couple of things about our process, and as it relates to certification exam development best practice, we are committed to certain key principles or guidelines in the development of our exams. We want to make sure that the new exam reflects the core competencies, the updated core competencies. And so, as I mentioned on the previous slide, we went through a very deliberate process to design the test specifications. So we asked coaches what should be on the exam and what proportion of questions should reflect each competency within the core competency framework. We're also committed to designing the new exam in alignment with best practices for assessment development, and that means including subject matter experts at each and every stage of the process. So it's important that coach practitioners themselves are involved in determining each element of the exam. So we talked a little bit about the test specifications or the blueprint of the exam. This is what subject matter experts helped us to create for the ICF credentialing exam. And what you'll see is essentially each competency in our framework has nearly equal proportional representation in the exam, meaning that each competency essentially has the same number of questions or items on the exam. There are a couple of small variations, but very, very minimal. It's pretty much equally spread across the competencies. Okay, so let's look at not just the overall exam development process, but let's look at specifically the process to maintain an exam once it's already operational. And that's what this chart shows. Several of the elements that are on this chart reflect some of the workshops and the key phases that I outlined previously, but we'll walk through each of these. At the start of our work to develop this new exam, we asked coaches to come together and develop what we call critical incidents or performance incidents, which are important experiences or incidents within their professional practice. And so a number of coaches came together and they developed more than 300 descriptions of actual coaching situations from their professional practice, from their experience. And these incidents serve as the foundation for the development of items on the ICF credentialing exam. They are really the basis for the questions that one will come across in the exam itself. It comes from actual coaching practice. Over the course of the next several months, we began working with HMRO and subject matter experts to draft items based on these scenarios, and they went through a multitude of reviews. That began with our project team at ICF and then extended to several different global panels of subject matter experts or coach practitioners. This includes just reviews for overall content, for accuracy and validity, technical reviews for grammar and word choice. We were very intentional about using an 8th grade level language for the exam item development. We then have a separate review for cultural bias, sensitivity, and cross-cultural meaning. Again, this is conducted by a global panel of subject matter experts to ensure that the items will have the same meaning and understanding and interpretation across coaches from around the world, that's not going to change the concept that's being assessed. Following all of these reviews, we also field test the exam. So we had about 300 coaches complete a pilot of this new exam in 2021 and 2022. And then we did a psychometric analysis of the field test data to identify items that should be included in the final exam. Some of the items didn't survive based on the statistics that we derived from that pilot assessment. We just want to make sure that those items that are on an operational exam that will be used to determine the award of a credential for a candidate are fair and valid and reliable measures of knowledge and skill. So over the course of all of these different efforts, more than 400 volunteers, coach practitioners like you have engaged in this work, have informed the development of the exam. And it's not over. So as soon as the exam was launched in August of 2022, we started right over again. So we're actually in this process all over again to create updates to the exam, new items for the form, and to review all of those items just as we did for the original operational exam. So it's constantly being refreshed with new items to determine a coach's knowledge and skill. So this next slide shows a little bit about the exam format. It is a computer administered exam. So candidates will take this exam on a computer, whether at their home or in a test center. We offer 2 different methodologies for the delivery of the exam, but it is computer-based either format. It's delivered in a proctored environment, and I'll talk a little bit more about the importance of that in just a moment. The exam itself is 3 hours. It's delivered in 2 sections. The first section has 41 items or questions. The second section has 40 items or questions. So 81 items overall, and there's an optional 5-minute break midway through the exam. So candidates can choose to take that break, have a little bit of a bio break in between those 2 sections. If someone's really interested in just moving on and completing the exam, they have the option to skip that break if they'd like. And this exam is the format of it is what we call a situational judgment test. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But first I want to circle back to why it's so important to deliver this exam in a proctored environment. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, it's best practice for certification bodies. And in fact, global standards for certification practice require secure testing. And why is that? It's really to assure fairness for candidates. That's really at the crux of the issue, is they want to assure fairness for candidates in the examination process to ensure that all candidates have an equitable experience in the exam, and that some don't have an unfair advantage at test content than others, even if it's a small number. ICF is committed to rigor in our standards. So for credential holders and also for us in the way that we deliver credentialing services. So to preserve the integrity of the exam and really to preserve the integrity of the credential and the value of that credential for everybody who works so hard to earn it, this is important to us. One thing that we know for sure through the global coaching study, and that's year after year of conducting that survey, multiple years have found that those who are not adequately trained individuals who call themselves a coach, they've been identified as the biggest obstacle for the coaching profession. And so that's another reason that this proctored exam is so important, to assure that those who ultimately earn a credential and are verified as rigorously trained, experienced, and proficient coach practitioners have truly earned that credential. So let's talk a little bit now about a situational judgment test and what that really means, what that entails. So a situational judgment test, the questions still have multiple choice responses. So candidates will see 4 different response options but it's designed not just to test knowledge, but also to test abilities and skills in a coaching context. With each scenario that's provided, there are several plausible but not equally effective ways of responding to that situation. Those are in the response options, those 4 response options. It's a little bit more nuanced than a simple knowledge exam, which has a very clear correct answer and 3 clearly incorrect answers. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. And it really requires the candidate to demonstrate good judgment in very complex situations, which is much like coaching itself. That is particularly the context that coaches find themselves every day in their practice, of having to navigate complex situations and make sound judgments based on core competencies and code of ethics. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like on the exam itself. The item format, candidates are presented with a very realistic scenario describing a real coaching situation. These are all based on all of those performance incidents that coaches provided to us several years ago at the very beginning of this process. Each scenario is followed by 4 response options, and the candidate is asked to identify the best action of the 4 presented and the worst action of the 4 presented. Those 4 presented response options, there may not be a perfect response, and there may not be a response that is absolutely horrible either. So it's important that candidates really review those response options and distinguish of those 4 that are presented, which one is the best and which one is the worst. We're going to take a look at one of the sample items. This is not an item from the actual exam, but it is a sample item that we offer on our website, just to give you a sense of the format and how it's presented during the exam itself. So here you have a scenario. Each scenario is usually around 100 words. Sometimes it can range up to 150 words, but it's about that length, and it is about that length. And then 4 response options. Then candidates are asked to drag and drop the best action to the box that is determined, that is labeled what is the best action, and to drag and drop the response option that represents the worst action in response to that scenario over to the appropriate box on the left-hand side. So what are these exam questions designed to do? The scenario sets the stage for the question itself and provides some really important information to the candidate to discern. What is it that candidates notice in that scenario? How do candidates synthesize the information that's presented, and what is really the competency that's at the core of that scenario. Those are important questions and determinations when reviewing those scenarios or item stems. When looking at the best action, we're trying to discern if a candidate can recognize the best, if not perfect, option from several fair and plausible responses that could follow the scenario that's presented. And then likewise with the worst action, it's really important for us to discern coaches who are able to identify what is the wrong answer out of those four. Like it's very relevant for the credentialing context to understand a coach who's able to do no harm, as it were. So let's talk a little bit about how this exam is scored. Candidates get 1 point for identifying each best and each worst action that's correct, okay? So for each scenario, a candidate can earn up to 2 points. They can earn 1 point if they identify one correct, either best or worst action. They can earn 2 points if they identify both the best and the worst action. All of these correct responses are identified by coach practitioners serving as subject matter experts. So these were keyed by actual coaching practitioners. In taking the exam, candidates can flag and review items at the end of each section. So if someone is going through the exam and they are stuck on a particular question, they can flag that question and come back to it at the end of the section. Now, it is important to complete for section 1. It's important for candidates to complete all of their questions in section 1 before they go to section 2. Once they've started the break, they're not able to go back to section 1 and complete any of the questions there. So that section will close when the time runs out or once the candidate moves on to the break in section 2. The exam uses a scaled score. So the scoring ranges from 200 to 600, and the passing score is set at 460. So let's talk about preliminary exam statistics, what we're seeing so far with this new exam since it's been in operation since August of last year. The average completion time for this exam is 170 minutes. That includes individuals who have been granted extended time. So this is under clearly the total exam time of 180 minutes. And for most candidates, it's considerably under that 180 minutes. Again, this 170-minute average includes all candidates who are given extended time and who take that extended time. So the exam pass rate across all of the administrations is just over 70%. So the majority of our candidates are very successful. And in fact, 76% pass the exam on their first attempt. Of all candidates who have completed the ICF credentialing exam since its launch in August of 2022, over 90% have gone on to earn their credential. And it's interesting, ACC and PCC, it's right, the very same statistic at 91.4% have gone on to earn their credential. And 93% of MCCs, although that's a smaller sample size. So I do want to make sure and note that. Now, this does not mean that those who have not yet earned the credential will not, because they are still able to take a retake of the exam. It's just that they haven't so far. I want to talk a little bit about exam accommodations. With this new format of the exam and delivering in a proctored environment, it gives us a new opportunity to provide a wider variety of exam accommodations for candidates who have a disability or a qualifying medical condition, than we've ever been able to before with an unproctored exam. With an unproctored exam, the only accommodation we were able to provide was extended time. Now we're able to provide a wider variety of accommodations to ensure that all candidates have equal access to the exam. So as part of the application process, applicants who may need an exam accommodation are able to indicate that need in the application itself. They'll do that under the exam tab in the application form. They will receive an immediate follow-up from our credentials and standards staff team with information about submitting the exam accommodations request form along with the form itself. And additional support in the accommodation request process. It's really important if a candidate needs an accommodation to access the exam that request is submitted prior to setting their exam appointment. Add accommodations once an exam appointment has been set with our testing vendors at Pearson VUE. Candidates can always cancel an exam appointment if they need to add an accommodation and then apply for that accommodation. But it is important to note that as soon as possible to submit that accommodation request form so that we can go ahead and process that. And we've had questions about what accommodations are available. Certainly we have some accommodations that are more commonly requested than others. Extended time remains the most commonly requested exam accommodation, but we are able to provide a variety of accommodations to candidates depending on their unique needs. And we take these requests and consider these requests and approve requests on a case-by-case basis. We want to make sure that the accommodation received is what is appropriate and what that candidate needs to access the exam. So this can include a separate testing room. It can include a reader or a scribe if need be. It can include a wide variety of accommodations. I do want to note that some accommodations, due to the nature of online testing, some accommodations are restricted to test center delivery. We are not able to provide certain accommodations if a candidate wants to take the test from the convenience of their home or office. And that's just based on the unique constraints of online testing. Let's talk a little bit about language aids, because with a global population, we of course want to make sure that we provide an accessible exam across our global community of coach practitioners. So we do that in a variety of languages. To date, the credentialing exam has been published with language aids in 12 languages. Just today, a form of the exam was published in Hungarian. So we're adding to these languages on a regular basis. We still have Czech, Polish, and Portuguese that will be published in the coming weeks. We anticipate having all of those available by the end of August. So that's very exciting. One of the things that I will mention with the exam language aids, the exam is presented in English, but the applicant can then view each of those items and their response options rather, in their selected language. We'll take a look at how that works in just a second. So they'll just push a button and they'll be able to see each of the exam items in that language of their choice. For candidates in which the exam is not offered in their primary language and the candidate resides in a non-English speaking country, they receive an automatic time extension of 60 minutes. So if a candidate resides in a country where there's not a language aid provided, they will receive 60 minutes of additional exam time. Also, candidates whose primary language is not English and we don't have language aids for their exam, they can request to use a hard copy bilingual translation dictionary to support them in taking the exam. We can talk a little bit more about that in a moment. These have to be hard copy web-based translation dictionaries or software smart device applications are not permitted for this. Additionally, candidates can submit a request for translation support to complete the credentialing exam. This is an optional fee-based service provided by Pearson VUE, and it allows a candidate to complete the exam with the translation assistance from a Pearson VUE approved translator. So again, this does have a fee that the candidate will have to pay, but it is available with request through Pearson VUE. So let's talk a little bit about how the language aids operate. Here you see the same screen we saw earlier, the same sample exam item that appeared earlier. And you see the only difference is that you have a translation button up in the top left-hand corner of the screen. If a candidate clicked that translation button, a new window would appear with a translated item and the response options. I've used Latin just here as an example, and it's certainly not translated accurately, but it just gives you a sense of how that translation language aid works. The candidate will then close that window and answer the question in the original kind of window on the original screen. We talked a little bit about these additional language supports, the extended time, the bilingual dictionary, and the request of a translator, so I won't go through those further. At that point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Aileen Gordon, who's going to talk a little bit about strategies and tips for preparing for the exam.
Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it. So we know that the biggest concerns for candidates are regarding how to prepare for the exam and then what to expect in the testing process. So we're going to take a quick look at some of the resources that are available to help you get prepared. To prepare for the exam, the best resources are your education and your experience. Your education was founded on the ICF core competencies, and through your experience, you apply your education. The exam is based on the ICF core competencies and the ICF Code of Ethics, so be sure to review both of those. In addition, you can spend time reflecting on common coaching situations and how coaches react to them. Give thought to what the core competencies look like when they're demonstrated and what coaching looks like when they are not demonstrated by a coach. As you look to prepare in earnest for the exam, here are some resources available to you. On the ICF website, under Credentials and Standards in the menu, on the gray navigation bar, click on Core Competencies. On this page, you can review the core competencies and access it in a multitude of different languages. On this page, you will also find links to a video series done on the competencies and to a recorded webinar that gave an overview of the updated competencies. Also on the ICF website, under the Home link on the menu, in the gray navigation bar under Ethics menu item, you will find the links to the ICF Code of Ethics. Along with reviewing the code, you can also access the ICF Code of Ethics video series. And at the bottom of the page, there's a link for Insights and Considerations for Ethics. The Insights and Considerations provide support to understanding each of the standards found in the Code of Ethics. And then reach into the bookshelf or the closet or wherever you may have stored your materials from your coach education program. Take the time to go through them again, refreshing yourself with the information on coaching it provided. On the ICF website, click on Credentials and Standards in the menu bar again, and scroll down about halfway to What does it take to earn a credential section. There, as the fifth item listed, you will find a link to the credentialing exam information page. On that page to the right is a gold bar. Click on the exam content link. On the exam content page, you will find 8 sample questions with the correct responses highlighted. And finally, reflect on your mentor coaching. Mentor coaching is intended to help you identify core competency skills in coaching and enhance the use of those skills in your own coaching. Here are a few tips for once the exam is in front of you. For some, including myself, when reading a scenario, there's the temptation to create a backstory. And then when looking at the responses, say, well, if this had happened, then this response would be correct. But if this other thing had happened, then the answer could be different. For the exam, remember that you are being asked to provide an answer based only on the information that is presented. In addition, remember that all responses are plausible, but for the exam, you will want to base your answer solely on the ICF core competencies and Code of Ethics. Which response is the best action to take in accordance with the competencies and ethics, and which is the worst action to take? Now that we've covered how to prepare for the exam, let's take a look at the process to reach the examination itself. The process begins in your application for a credential. In the application, there's an exam section, and in that section, you will need to enter your legal first and last name as they're displayed on the identification you plan to use to check in on exam day. If the name entered does not match, then you will not be able to take the exam that day. In addition, if you need to request an accommodation, you will indicate that in the application. Once your application has been received by ICF, you can turn your attention to the next steps. First, if you indicated that you needed an accommodation, complete the paperwork and submit it as directed with any needed documentation. If you need any language assistance, complete the language support request form and submit that to ICF support. Second, do the research to find a testing center in your area so you can plan accordingly. If a testing center is not easily accessible, you can consider taking the exam online through Pearson OnView. We'll cover some considerations for taking the exam online in just a bit. And finally, once you receive your email notice from ICF that you have been authorized to take the exam, you will then be able to schedule how and when you want to take your exam. Detailed information on how to schedule the exam will be included in the exam authorization email. In preparation for exam day, you will want to have accessible the 2 forms of identification you will be using to check in for the exam. Take time to read through the frequently asked questions about the exam that are available from ICF and Pearson VUE, so that you feel oriented to the exam process. Whether you're taking the exam in a testing center or online, Pearson VUE has a multitude of resources to help you understand the testing procedure and what to expect on exam day. On exam day, be well rested and have a snack or a meal prior to the exam so you can focus on the exam fully when you're taking it. If you're traveling to a test center, allow for plenty of time for potential traffic issues, or if taking it online, take time well before your exam to ensure your testing space is in compliance with all rules and policies. Make sure you have your identification for the check-in process with you. Check in 30 minutes prior to your scheduled exam time. Read all test instructions and rules thoroughly so you feel confident in proceeding with the exam properly. And then take your time. In each section of the test, you can flag questions you would like to return to for review. Be advised that questions flagged in section 1 of the exam must be reviewed and final responses selected prior to that section closing for the 5-minute break. Section 1 consists of 41 scenarios and you have 87 minutes to complete it. And note, if you do not want to take a break, once you finish section 1 or the 87 minutes for section 1 is passed, you may proceed directly to section 2. Section 2 has 40 scenarios with 85 minutes to select your responses. Live remote proctoring in general is a fairly new service that has evolved nearly overnight with the COVID-19 pandemic. While it offers the opportunity to complete an ICF exam for your home or office, it is really important to be aware of the technical requirements for an online proctored exam and of the various rules and policies that apply that are specific to testing online. This guide from Pearson VUE walks through each stage of the remote proctoring test, including preparations that are critical to completing prior to the appointment, as well as what to expect during the exam appointment. Please read through the guide carefully when making the decision on if you wish to test online or go to a testing center. There are so many dynamics and factors at play when testing from home or work, from software applications on the computer system to internet connectivity issues that could impact the exam delivery. Even when all preparations are taken in advance, there are still factors that could impact the exam experience. This guide also provides information on how to contact Pearson VUE should something arise during the exam. And ICF Credentials and Standards is also here to support candidates who experience issues with the online exam. For these reasons, many candidates choose to complete the exam in a test center, where the unique technical challenges of online testing are not a factor. We partner with Pearson VUE in part because they are among the few testing vendors that provide global testing services with centers available around the world. If you have trouble locating a test center near you, please reach out to support@coachingfederation.org. We can always work with Pearson VUE to identify and locate a third-party testing center to support our exam candidates.
So I'm going to stop here and check if there's any question in the room. Right, we are almost done with the entire video. Most of the important aspect, the question that you were asking before we started, I believe is being touched upon. So any questions, if you have at this point, feel free to put in the chat box, and Sandhya will, in our capacity, are going to share. Thank you so much, Gitanjali. Okay. Do we have to complete the recorded session? Sorry, just a sec. Prior to taking the written exam? If you mean, do you have to watch this entire recorded session before the exam? No, that's not mandatory. This is to inform the candidates. This is the most authentic source from which you get to hear the director, global director of credentialing, sharing about the exam. Mind it, what you're watching is a recorded session. This was recorded live in 2023. On June 11th, there's going to be another one which will come. And every year, there is some variation, some changes which is coming in the examination. And the best place to know about it, if you're planning to give after June 11th, then I'm sure you should not miss that webinar. For members, it's free. I'm not sure whether, for non-member, if it is paid. Do we have?
Hang on, Debashri, can I come in there, please?
Yes, please.
So I noticed one question about submitting a recording. Yeah. So the recording, Delisa, I think, and Gitanjali also asked that question, right? It is, do we have to submit our recorded coaching conversation to ICF prior to taking the written exam? Well, it depends on what path you're on. If you've enrolled for the level 2 program, then your mentoring and approval of your one-on-one of your calls is done by your mentor. You could say that the mentor and the assessor come in as a package deal. But if you sorry, but if you are following the ACSTH path or the level 1 path where mentoring is separate, then you have to submit the recording for an ICF assessor. And I also noticed a question right at the beginning. I think it was Bhaskaran who'd written that. Why does it take so long? Right? Why does that take so long? Because they listen to the conversation again and again too, and they use markers to assess whether all markers have been demonstrated or not. Whereas in the level 2 process, your mentor is listening for the markers when you're either submitting a call to them or you're coaching live during the mentoring session. So, Bhaskaran, you will not be submitting a call.
Thank you, Sandhya.
Because you upgraded to the level 2.
Yeah, thank you.
The transition program. Right. Gitanjali, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Sandhya, thank you.
And we do have a recording for the previous webinar in the YouTube, the chapter YouTube channel, where we spoke about all the application parts. Right. So I'll, Debashi, do we have a link to that channel right now?
Let me pull it up. I can share it with. But meanwhile, I would ask everybody to follow our chapter page, because
Yeah.
everything which happens, that's the place to
On LinkedIn.
look for the latest and more authentic resources, because not everything will be a video, right? So if you
Right.
follow our chapter LinkedIn page, you will be automatically directed to all the different resources that we have, video, text, anything. So that is it. Some of you were asking for the resources, the PDF. So Bhaskaran, I have shared. So if you can acknowledge, yes, got it.
Yeah, thank you. Yes,
Hmm.
I got it.
Somebody also asked for ACC, candidate path, and I've shared the same. Anything else? And I think I've shared all.
Yes, the 60 minutes extra only for when you're, I think that's coming up again a couple of times, Debashi. It is, if you mention that English is not your first language, then you get some extra time.
But at the same time,
I
Sandhya,
would not, yeah, I would
yeah,
not,
it is very important to go and check what is the current, policy.
yes,
Okay, so
correct,
yeah,
correct. Don't
things
go
are
in,
changing very fast, and we cannot. This
yeah, we
webinar is
cannot say it
2020.
with guarantee,
So what's
absolutely.
happening right now is to be checked in real time. Okay, having said that, Hindi as a first language, Bengali as a first language, Tamil, Malala as a first language, all these are not enlisted. You can see there were 12 foreign languages, it's not there.
Yeah.
So what is, how ICF is addressing to people with first language falling in under those categories, you have to go and check, real time, the current policy.
Hmm. Just go in prepared with 3 hours, that you're going to be getting 3 hours. And whether it's the old exam or the new exam, I've seen years of, prep by the coaches that I've mentored for the older exam, the CKA, and now the credentialing exam. One thing remains constant. You have to get back to your books. You really need to know the code of ethics and standards like the back of your hand, and you need to really absorb and implement every nuanced skill for each competency. So that when you read the scenario there, you know exactly what they are asking. It's like, when in coaching we say, what are you listening for? So even for that scenario, those 81 scenarios that you have there, what are you listening for? Are you able to identify what they are asking right there? That is the, if you know your competencies, you know all the 37, 38 skills, you know your code of ethics and standards, you cannot make a mistake. And that was true for the older exam, and it is for the, which is true for the new one as well. So there is really nothing to be scared of. It's just the difference is that we have the worst option as well. One way I would say to look at it is the best option is usually client centric. Listen for the competencies, look at what has been written there. And the worst option actually is the easiest. So the basic thing is know your competencies. There's no escaping that. Go back to your coach training material, whichever coach training school you're from.
And
Right?
something, if I may add from my experience of giving both the examination, the earlier one uh, really did not test my. I had limited experience during that time
Mm,
in coaching in organizations or with in the corporates. But in the second examination, I really that made a lot of difference because the scenarios, whatever that comes again, I can't say much, but I felt that when you're practicing as a coach and
correct.
you are following the competencies, your competencies are alive in your practice, which doesn't come in just doing peer-to-peer coaching. Like
Yeah.
I'm somebody like in all my 500 hours, maybe there were very few hours of peer coaching which was there. But most of it is, with my clients. I felt that made a difference in cracking the exam in a go.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Barter coaching, I agree. Barter coaching is a support we provide for practice. It's ICF says barter coaching is a great way to build your hours. But there's got to be a balance because coaching another coach will always be different, right? And Sandhya, Rudraksh. I
Got
know.
it.
Rudra Raju. Yeah, I hope you got what you wanted from this webinar. I remember you're connecting with me on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm a little.
Sandhya, I hope, uh, Sandhya Rudraraju is also saying thank you so much.
Mhm.
So I hope that you got the insight to take the first step or got insights from the ICF Global Credentialing Director on how to approach it. And what we would suggest to all of you is just follow that because there's a reason, there's a thorough process, there's a lot of thought and research behind the examination the way it is. So
Hmm.
and the core readings or the core items for you to build your muscle has already been shared. Do that because I see a lot of our friends doing so many things, including me. I started with watching so many videos, doing so many things, but you need to be strategic, very smart about going, for your credentialing exam. And most important,
Balance time and
balance time. That's very important.
info.
And that's where our core competencies about integrity and, all of these, you have to be alive in terms of the competencies. And if you are a demonstration of the core competencies in your life, inside and outside coaching sessions, you will be unstoppable. The way you see Sandhya, she's not where, but she is there because she's given her word to all of you. That is the heart of an educator. I would say, like, everybody come on, online and give a big round of applause to her because she's really, really unwell. And it's a love for, being there for people who really want to, are struggling, who really across the globe. And just for that, she's there. And that is what I would say a gold standard, an embodiment of what an ICF coach should be.
Thanks,
So,
Devashi, for your kindness. Thank
so
you.
show her some love. I want to see some hearts on screen.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Devashi, do we have a few moments if there is anyone who's just taken? Thanks, Helen. Thank you. Thank you all. So, if there's anyone who's just taken the exam lately, this month, last month, would they like to share their experience? Do we have time for that, Devashi?
We have, but do we have anybody in the room who'd like to share? And keeping your NDA in mind, what we shared, right?
We will
Anybody?
not talk about the questions,
Hmm.
but we talk about how the process was.
Do we have
And
anybody in the room?
I did see Sonal. And where are you? Maybe she's just signed out.
Maybe she is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Anybody else? Happy to hear you out. And thank you all. Thank you so
And
much.
I want to thank Mr. Radhakant Jaiswal, our president. He's there in the webinar. Radhakantji, do you want to share something before we log off?
Sorry, I have a question.
No worries.
Do we have to finish our 500 hours before taking the exam, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And will you give us a template of how to present these like 500 hours?
Right. Just maintain a coaching log for yourself where you have client name, number of hours spent, and whether it was pro bono, whether it was paid, things like that. Maintain a spreadsheet.
Okay, so no formal template, right?
There is no formal template, but yes.
Okay.
I think you've just started mentoring, right? You've just started with mentoring, Helen.
No, I started last year, actually beginning last year. I had a CODC as well. With
No,
CODC.
mentoring for PCC or ACC. That has just started.
Mentoring has just started, yes.
So let the journey unfold.
On
Okay.
that note, let the
Yeah.
journey unfold with bold moves, right? Thank you so much. It was pleasure having all of you this evening. Stay bright.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so